Hey, I'd like to welcome you to another episode of Mission Matters. My name is Adam Torres, and if you'd like to apply to be a guest in the show, just head on over to missionmatters.com and click on Be Our Guest to apply. All right, so today we are recording an episode with Richard Rothenberg. He is the CEO over at Global AI Corporation, and this is part of our FII Priority Miami series where we've been featuring different participants in the FII Institute's summits, and man, I've been having a lot of fun. This is my first year being introduced to FII Institute and had some great guests on. And first off, Richard, I just want to say welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. It's my pleasure to be here.
So, Richard, as I mentioned, I'm a newbie to the FII Institute and to the community as a whole. I understand, based on some of our previous conversations, like you've been following for some time. Maybe let's start the conversation there. What drew you to the Institute?
Yes, so the Institute is unique in the sense that first event I attended was Brazil in Sao Paulo last year. And it was, in my opinion, one of the leading events that put together not just people from the private sector, top CEOs and from world-class banks and corporations, but also ministers. The president of the country was there, as well as other former presidents. And I think it had a very unique perspective on emerging markets in the global south in general. And I believe it's a great counterbalance to the World Economic Forum, which is mostly focused on the global north, G7. And I think that's very unique, and I would say it's one of the top events out there, in my opinion.
What were some of your favorite? You were at the Miami event, am I right? Yeah?
I was there as well, yeah.
Yeah. Those that were unable to attend or are just kind of curious about what one of these events are like, what are some of your favorite moments or just things from the event?
Well, first of all, I think the attendance of President Trump was significant given that he doesn't regularly attend events. And then, having major decision makers there's like Elon Musk and the former CEO of Google and others was really nice to see that attendance. And I saw many others in the audience as well from the U.S. administration and also from top sovereign wealth funds from the Middle East and the U.S. and especially in the hedge fund space in the U.S. People, CEOs from Bridgewater, Citadel, and some of the biggest names out there. And I think this is very unique to see that in a conference.
Yeah, I was pretty blown away. I didn't get in to see the president. I tried. I was in line. I swear I was like 30 people away. I'm like, come on. I was like 30 people away. They're like, nope, you're cut off. I'm like, well, there you go. And there goes my media badge, right? It was all good. So I went to the media. I went to the media room, and I was watching in this big, amazing theater they had for us. It was awesome. Oh man! So let's switch it up a little bit. I want to know a little bit more about your company. So maybe start there. Tell us a little bit more about Global AI.
Yeah, absolutely. So actually, the origins of Global AI originated being a think tank first. It started as a group of scientists from the Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory. It's one of the world's largest supercomputing labs under the Department of Energy. It's actually where the cyclotron started, the Manhattan Project was one of the first labs. So it has a long history. And we were a group of people convened by top Harvard physicist, Dr. Weber, to work on the flash crash, which was a major event in 2010 that basically the market went down 10% in 10 minutes. And it was a major national security issue. And people working on the high-frequency space, came together. And at the time, the government didn't have the resources to address these systemic issues. And basically, at the time, I was a high-frequency trader at Deutsche Bank, and other practitioners from top hedge funds and investment banks came together and helped the government, and later on the Federal Reserve to work on this issue. And then later on work with the United Nations, and we saw a big demand at the intersection of big data, AI, and global finance and other major issues. And therefore we decided to create also a company to complement the company. And to this date, we've addressed major issues that involve also the global south, meaning that address global sustainable issues, global financial issues, and also major innovations in terms of natural language processing, LLM, and big data, the state of the art. And I've been part also originally at the AI Conclave at the FII Priority, which is a group that brings together experts and has a unique perspective on the global south. And this is something I have not seen at any other gathering. Even when I was at Davos earlier this year, there was no such thing like an AI focused on the global south and emerging markets. And I think that was a very unique contribution that the FII brings and that I'm happy to be part of.
Let's talk a little bit more about AI. Like, how is AI currently being leveraged to maybe address some of the systemic challenges that you're seeing, maybe in sustainable finance?
Yes. So one of the ways in which it's addressed at the systemic level, so one example relates to ESG or sustainable finance. So essentially the way companies evaluate portfolios. And there's something called greenwashing, for example, where companies report, basically only where they think areas where they look good, and they don't report things where they look bad. So from that perspective, AI has been useful to basically web scrap and gather data from not just the company, but also news, NGO, local people on the ground, if, say, a company has operations in various countries, and source local news in the local language. So, for example, one company we analyzed in South America, we found that 70% of the relevant information was in Spanish, in local sources, in terms of negative issues in ESG, like environmental, social, and governance. And a lot of this information either did not arrive or there was a major lag in arriving to mainstream sources like Bloomberg or New York Times and such. So this time delay, this geo-tagging that AI allows and multi-language capability and timeliness basically enables investors, sustainable investors, impact investors, to better assess risks, generate alpha because they can react faster to opportunities and risks and basically be able to have a larger impact in the market with a positive footprint.
What kind of trends are you following right now? I'm curious. I mean, based on how long you've been in this industry, you're obviously, at top conferences like FII, and you're having these conversations daily. What kind of trends are you following and or, let's just say, excite you?
Yeah, some of the things that excite me are new trends in, for example, one of them is agentic AI. So I'm actually collaborating on a book precisely on this topic that will release later this year. We're a co-author. It was Dr. Noguer, who's a very renowned professor from the Columbia University and NYU, the topic of machine learning. And essentially, we're looking at new types of AIs. A lot of people are familiar with GPT, but when you use things like that, it has a very limited memory and context. And now we start to see things like DeepSeek and others that can think a few steps ahead. So basically, we excited about the new wave of AIs that are going to come out that basically going to involve not only something called chain of thought, which is basically almost imagine an algorithm playing chess that can analyze things several steps ahead and the probabilities of each step ahead, and then make probabilistic decisions in the real time based on the new information as it arrives. And then also the multimodality is going to enable much more context. So it's not just going to be text, but also vision, and also with the robotic configurations, also physical inputs. And when you combine this with the ability to connect to human interfaces, and by that I mean your phone, your computer, your bank account. So basically the AIs are going to be able to perform any function the human do, also replicate the voice, perform transactions. Ultimately, with more and more automation, as the learning rate increases and the error rate diminishes, trust is going to, take over. And right now I see adoption being very slow in the industry overall, even though the opportunity is very big. News, a little bit, make it look a little bigger than it is because, there's a lot of buzz, but adoption is still very limited, as you know. So there's privacy issues and many other challenges, limited data. So I believe that in the next 5 years, as these challenges start to get overcome, we're going to see a major, major transformation across all, key critical industries. And I believe that this can be for good. We shouldn't be fearing, our jobs being replaced, but I would say enhanced, maybe augmented. We can do more with less and probably even work less hours, and it'll be increased productivity and economic numbers go up. So that's one scenario. Obviously, I'm not saying, it can go bad as well, but trying to stay positive, and I think that's one direction that people are not talking enough. Everybody's thinking of Terminator, and I don't think that's the only scenario. there's AI for good, and that's promising.
Absolutely. Let's talk a little bit about the infrastructure investment gap. How can AI help bridge the infrastructure investment gap in developing countries? Like, what does that look like to you?
Oh, yeah, precisely. So being part of various discussions on this topic, United Nations and G20, and essentially we see major challenges in terms of data gaps and transparency.
Mm-hmm.
And essentially, when you go to an emerging country, there's risks that you need to consider that are not present in major markets.
Mm-hmm.
Like you start to look at the country risk, the project risk, the currency risk, political risk. And other risks that are hard to quantify typically are analyzed manually, by quote-unquote experts,
Mm-hmm.
which are very limited. So this creates a bottleneck. But with the help of AI, a lot of these unstructured or noisy data can be extracted, quantified, and analyzed in a systematic manner. Basically, we see a scenario where many of the gaps that exist today are going to be filled with either real data or proxies, and machines will help systematically collect the data as well that's missing in a way that doesn't involve humans, but it can be done, with agents. With AI agents. And so this can rapidly increment the information available and reduce the data gaps so that investors can make better risk-return impact decisions.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, when we look at return, it's going to better assess potential returns, also risks, and also impact in terms of sustainability, as mentioned earlier. It can uncover hidden risks and other information based on the local data and non-traditional sources on a large scale. And the deeper you go into the emerging markets, the stronger this is the case, especially like in South Africa, in the sub-Saharan Africa and Southeast Asia and poorer countries that major data gaps, that's where the most impact is going to be. Mm-hmm. And then ultimately also on the application case. Today we live in a world where many of the finance is still in I call the 80s, we're still looking very old school models like invariance and, things like factor model are kind of like cutting edge. But AI, again, is only being adopted by very few players, like only the top quant hedge funds in the world. And this is going to become more, mainstream across different players. And ultimately it's going to enable to process more information faster, better, and basically tilt the balance towards more capital and they invest in emerging markets. Because right now, people are basically scared and there's no data. Mm-hmm. So if we have models that can better assess risk and can better uncover opportunities, more capital is going to naturally flow. And I think we're going to see major opportunities in uncover and basically major infrastructure projects being funded that are bankable and currently not being funded. And I think that's going to be very good for millions of people that, water, power, and renewables and other key industries, critical minerals and other areas.
Well, Richard, this has been great having you on the show today and learning more about, of course, your company, which is originally started as a think tank, but also, your work. That being said, if somebody's listening or watching this, and if they want to continue the dialogue or to continue to follow your work or learn more, how do they do that?
Absolutely. Yeah, we're available. My email is rr@globalai.co. And we also have our think tank website, which is global-ai.org. And I'm also on LinkedIn, Richard Rothenberg, Global AI. Please feel free to reach out. Happy to share more views and thoughts on these important topics that are happening today, particularly on AI.
Perfect. Wonderful. For you listening, just so you know, we'll definitely put some contact information in the show notes. And if this is your first time with Mission Matters and you haven't done it yet, hit that subscribe or follow button. This is a daily show. Each and every day we're bringing you new content, new ideas, and hopefully new inspiration to help you along the way in your journey as well. So again, hit that subscribe or follow button. And Richard, thanks again for coming on the show.
No, thank you so much for the invitation. It was a pleasure. Looking forward to listening to each other and subscribing.